Dear friends, in this episode, we speak about the events that followed the death of Saint Therese of Lisieux. As we saw in the previous episode, she died on the 30th of September 1897 in the evening at 7:30. But her burial takes place only after 4 days, on the 4th of October. And unusually, for a cloistered Carmelite, her body was buried in a public cemetery, the cemetery of Lisieux, which is 10 kilometers away from Lisieux Carmel. The reason was there were 4 graves in the Carmel compound, but all the 4 were full. So there was no place to bury within the cloistered compound. So the body had to be buried in the public cemetery. And that was providential. That's why, so people could easily have access to the cemetery rather than a cemetery inside the convent. And people coming, flocking to pray at the tomb. And within 3 years, the devotion spread. Favors and cures began to take place. And pilgrims start flowing to the worship. That is by 1902, 1897 she died. Maybe the first year was a dormant year, but from 1999 to 2009, 1889 to 1902, that 3 years, so many favors, cures took place, and pilgrims started coming there. And after 10 years, in 1907, 1897 she died. 10 years later, 1907, the Bishop of Bayeux, seeing the enthusiasm of the people to visit and ask for favors and so on, he foresaw a saint, a canonized saint. The Bishop of Bayeux asked the members of the community to write their impressions about Therese. And 2 fathers were appointed as postulator and vice postulator. And in 1910, that's 13 years after her burial, the first exhumation took place. Exhumation means taking the body out from the tomb. Humus in Latin means soil, earth. So take out from the grave, take it out. And this is a part of the canonization because it is to identify the saint and to prove that such a person historically existed. And to inform you, I had worked as a vice postulator, even now I am doing it. So the body will be taken out, and if it is not decayed, all these, the skeleton, all the bones will be cleaned and counted and recorded. And then after exhumation, that was buried in a little far from that first place. So we'll see in the picture, the place with the cross was the first place she was buried. The place with the statue of Our Lady, that was second place where she was buried. But then in 1923, the body would be transferred to Lisieux Carmel. By the way, her body was not incorrupt. Body was decomposed. Only skeleton remained. So those skeletons were brought to Lisieux Carmel, and now it is in Lisieux Carmel. And we'll see from the picture, it is in a casket. The body, we can find there a statue made of wax in the posture when she died. And in that wax statue, the skeleton were kept. So that's it's a relic covered with within a wax statue, wax body. And on that room, that is for your just imagination, as you enter Lisieux Carmel Church, to the right, you will find a side chapel where the relics are kept. And above that, above the casket of Little Flower, there is the statue of Our Lady, the statue of Smile, which cured Therese when she had that strange illness. So that's a right place. And it is said on 1923, when the body was, mortal remains were transferred to Lisieux, two miracles took place. One was a soldier who was mutilated and later who became paralyzed. Not mutilated, he was seriously wounded and later became paralyzed. That man would be healed. He would be up on his feet. Secondly, a little blind girl who came to Lisieux Carmel to witness this important event, though she would not be able to see it, but as blind people participate, she also came there. To the surprise of all, when the body relics were brought to the Carmel, she could regain her sight. She started seeing, she could see with her own natural eye this transferring of the relics. So two miracles took place on that day. And in 1925, she would be beatified. After collecting the evidences from the sisters and some other people, and Pope Pius X in 1914 signs the decree officially introducing the canonization process of Saint Therese. And 1923, that's 7 years after the decree was published, there was the exhumation, first exhumation. Exhumation means taking the body outside the tomb. Some may be incorrupt, some may be only a skeleton. But that's a part of the process of canonization, as it to prove the historical identity of a saint. Such a person existed. It is not to see an incorrupt body, just to identify and prove that such a person historically existed. The reason is, in the early centuries, so many were canonized without any proper evidence. So to check that kind of misuse or wrong process, in the modern times, exhumation is a part of the canonization. And after on this exhibition was the 26th of March, 1923. That day, that year, on 29th of April, that's about 1 month or 5 weeks, she was beatified. For your information, the process of canonization takes place in 4 stages: servant of God, venerable, blessed, and saint. And when April 29, 1923, she was beatified. And the relics were brought to the Lisieux Carmel, where her mortal remains are preserved inside a wax statue. When we see the coffin or a casket, we will find Therese lying in this way. That's how she died, that posture. And in that way, a wax statue was made and the skeleton were kept inside. And above that casket, we can also find in the Lisieux Carmel Chapel the statue of Our Lady, the Our Lady Smile. So this is kept as you enter Lisieux Carmel on the right side. And later, the mortal remains of the other sisters, Maria, Pauline, and Celine, would be brought, but they will be kept in a vault on the wall of this chapel. The parents, before canonization, were buried outside the basilica of Little Flower. Now it's inside. So they are the four sisters in Carmel, parents in the basilica, and Leonie naturally in her visitation convent in Caen. So this is how the end of the family. She was canonized on the 7th of May 1925, and 2 years later she would be declared by Pius XI as the patroness of the missions. And in 1997, the first death centenary of her death, but date is different. On the 19th of October, she was declared by John Paul II as the Doctor of the Church. Many expected, I was present for the concluding ceremony in 97 September, but many expected she would be declared as doctor on that centenary celebration. But what I heard was the church deliberately avoided that day. If she was declared in Lisieux, she would have been a doctor of the church limited to one particular diocese. But this was done during the World Youth Day of 1997. So she was declared a doctor of the church on 19th October 1997. That's 100 years after her death. And what do you mean by a doctor of the church? One is declared a doctor, one is given the title of a doctor, supposes that person has contributed some original doctrine in particular branch, in philosophy or in medicine or in theology and so on. But in this case, Therese, in the spiritual theology, she was declared a doctor. And there are 34 doctors in the church, 30 are men doctors, and 4 are women doctors. The first 2 women were Therese of Avila and Catherine of Siena. And third was Little Flower. Now there is also a Benedictine nun. So, doctor means someone who has contributed to the spiritual richness of that particular branch, in our case, particular regarding spiritual theology. So, what is her contribution to prove that she was a doctor of the church? First, she would be known as Doctor of Love. In the church, we have doctors with different titles, like mystical doctor, seraphic doctor, angelic doctor, and so on. So Teresa would be known as Doctor of Love. You may remember when we spoke about my vocation is love, I said Therese had different aspirations: to be a warrior, to be a priest, to be an apostle, to be a doctor, and to be a martyr. She also wanted to be a doctor to enlighten people. At that time, she just spoke about her inner inspiration, but that became a reality after 110 years in Lisieux. She was declared doctor in Paris, not in Lisieux, during the World Youth Day. So in that way, Therese is a contribution to the modern church.